then we see that diversity is uniqueness is a beautiful thing. It's not about leveraging that and saying, this is why I'm a victim. It's about, no, this is what makes me special. This is what brings me together. These are common.
Emotional algebra, where the heart meets the math. What is integral is derivative as you figure out your path. Power plus emotions equals more than you can see. Listening to the wisdom.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Emotional Algebra with me, Dr. E. Today, I am inviting or have invited a great friend of mine from my years of internship, which I won't even tell you how many decades ago that was. I just teased it there a little bit. But we were in the office right next to each other in the days of Georgia State at the counseling center there, and have always enjoyed staying connected with her. And no matter how long it's been, it's like talking to an old friend, like it's been only a few days whenever we reconnect. So she's got a really interesting career, and her name is Kristee Haggins. She is a community healer, African-centered psychologist, consultant, professor who takes a holistic approach to healing mind, body, spirit, and community. She received her BA from USC, go Trojans, now a part of the Big Ten, and she did her graduate school at Ohio State University, go Bucks. So now with my connection to Ohio State, we always, had that connection way back in internship, but now we're even in the Big Ten together. So go Big Ten. But she's executive director and founder of Safe Black Space, a nonprofit organization focusing on helping Black people heal and thrive in the face of racism and anti-Blackness. She's an associate professor at the College of Psychology, the California North State University, and is president of the Greater Sacramento chapter, the Association of Black Psychologists. So what I loved about what she's doing, and we're definitely going to dive deeply in this, I love hearing about what she's doing with Safe Black Space and how she's really working to give back to her community and really help not only our generation, but next generations, as she's paid a lot forward in her life and really has always been somebody to want to benefit the people around her. So she's been a clinician, an educator, a trainer, administrator, and she's a speaker and consultant and does presentations, workshops, and trainings. So we're going to find out how you can get in touch with her if you'd like to speak with her about being a part of Safe Black Space and or even speaking with you and or your community. So I am going to welcome her in here. And here she is, Kristee.
Hey there. Good to see you. Good to be here.
Absolutely. And thanks for joining me on this journey of emotional algebra with Dr. E. And it's been fun to see what all of our collaborative internship mates are doing in our careers.
Absolutely. What a joy.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us about Safe Black Space and what it does and what you've been doing and where you're hoping to go with it.
Sure. Thank you for the invitation, first of all, Eric, to be here, to talk with you, to share this information. I am honored knowing we have known each other for decades to see how far we both have come in that time. So
we still look the same age we did back during, and you still look just as young.
Just a little gray hairs.
Yeah.
But we do. So let me tell you about Safe Black Space. Please let me know if I get long-winded. I always have so much to say about this organization that I helped to found and for which I'm the executive director of. But I want to start kind of at the beginning in terms of how we were established. I have to acknowledge that I never set out to start a nonprofit organization. It felt as though it was a call to respond to the need to what was happening here in Sacramento, which then developed over time. So what am I talking about? In 2018, and you or others may remember or not, depending on your region and location and how connected you were. But at that time in 2018, Stephon Clark was a young Black man who was killed by Sacramento police officers in his grandmother's backyard, holding only a cell phone and accused of breaking car windows. At that time, it was very disruptive. It was a time here in the local area where things really became intense within the community at large, and particularly in terms of the impact on the local Black community. There were protests, there were marches. His brother, Stevante Clark, was really going through his own trauma reaction, really, to what had occurred. And so there were instances within the first few days and week of his being killed where I-5, so one of our major highways, was shut down because of protesters that were on the freeway. There was the mayor's office and city council, a meeting that was disrupted and shut down because of protesters. There was a Kings game, Sacramento Kings game, that was canceled because of protesters. So there was just a lot of energy, I guess I would say, that was being experienced at that time here locally. And me, as you know, being a psychologist, being an African-centered psychologist, wanted to respond and help in whatever way I can or could at that time. And I remember one of the representatives for the family was saying, "Where are the mental health professionals?" Right? She literally on media, on kind of the local station, was pleading for people to help. And I had been doing some work prior to that, the last few years before that, with the Association of Black Psychologists, with my previous employer, California Institute for Behavioral Health Solutions, where we had a contract where we were working across the state of California to help Black communities get trained in a particular kind of healing circle modality. And the year before, again, you may remember this, in 2017, in the summer, we had two major killings of Black men back to back. Philando Castile, who was shot in his car in front of his baby girl, even though he had a license to carry. And then the next day, or it may have the days reversed, was Alton Sterling was killed for selling cigarettes. So it was at that time that those organizations and the work that I had done prior to Safe Black Space, that we developed a racial trauma toolkit, right? A way for Black community members and people and agencies to identify how they could take care of themselves, understanding that racial stress, trauma is real. It's very similar to post-traumatic stress disorder, which we're all very familiar with. Yeah. So long story made short, after Stephon was killed, within maybe 2 weeks of that, I pulled together people that I knew. I did a pretty brief training around how to implement that circle, the racial stress and trauma application. And we offered a healing circle in person for Black community members to come, to have a place to talk about what was happening, process their reactions and emotions, to identify resources that they could take with them, and that kind of thing. And so we knew we were going to do a couple of circles because it was so much that was happening. So we did that one. We had maybe 50 or so people come to that. And then we offered another one. We were planned to do another one within a few weeks, and we did that. Had another good turnout, and people were asking, well, when's the next one? And when are we going to meet again? And so from there, here we are now 7 years later, continuing to offer these circles for the community related to some of the issues of racism, discrimination, anti-Blackness, and its impact on folks.
Yeah. No, it's great what you're doing. And, you saw a need and you answered the call. I think that's what we're all, to me, we all have a way to answer the call of in life in different ways. It doesn't all have to be grand gestures. Sometimes it's just reaching out to people. It's connecting people together. And I think you and I have talked about, talked about my work I did in Haiti with community building and the thing I taught there about that I've talked about on the show several times. But to me, if you don't have trust, you don't have a community. And when you have so many people who feel disenfranchised, and this is all around the world, that they don't feel safe, they don't know where their safe places are, they don't know who to trust, like we talked about, and that leads to a lot of fear. And then when we react from fear because of those
Mhm.
disruptions, fear is often, I always say, fear lives in the future. It looks to the future to say, what could happen that I might need to do to protect myself? And pain lives in the past. And what are the things that happen in the past that fear is often looking forward to say, I want to prevent this pain from happening again? Well, then
Right.
that drives people from a fear place to potentially start to carry guns and things. And even though they're licensed to do that, and I think even then, we then look at people who justify why they do what they do from the police standpoint of they live with fear and they live with their own perceptions and their own traumas. And it's not about justifying, excusing the behaviors. It's about understanding and understanding how we all got here. And it sounds like what you're trying to do is really add to a sense of understanding of community, to give an identity to a group of people, and then to, to help them see how to move forward. And in that, I'd love to hear more. It's, since we talk about emotional algebra here, what are the beliefs, the attitudes, the perceptions, the emotions, the histories that drive us as individuals and potentially contribute to groups? What do you see as the emotional algebra of the Black community that really you're trying to address and shift to offer a better view of future, so people don't have to live with so much fear? And how do you feel like you want to educate the masses to really help to bring us all together to a mutual understanding?
Yeah.
I know that was a long question.
Listen, I was just about to say, okay, Dr. E, you hit so many different components. So I'll kind of start where I can, and then you can redirect me, or I can make sure that I'm trying to address all the things. So I guess what I would say is I appreciate that comment you're making about pain lives in the past and fear lives in the future, and how complicated in many ways and complex our own personal histories are, but also our collective histories and identities. And so part of what happens with Safe Black Space is an acknowledgement of both of those things, right? Kind of the larger socio-political environment presently, historically, in addition to someone's own lived experience, and how those are often very interconnected. And so when we consider, again, the historical perspectives broadly of how people of African ancestry, Black folks have been treated as a collective, we can't deny that there's been a sense of their inhumanity, criminalization, negative stereotyping, over policing, miseducation. Like there's just a wealth of things that contribute towards how the community at large may feel, may react. And so that is some of what, when I was talking about the origins of Safe Black Space and what was happening here in Sacramento, that's a big part of what was being tapped. There was anger, there was rage, there was sadness, there was grief. People were all over the place. But again, as we and they and us were kind of tapping into some of that historical perspective that felt like and is still occurring, right? In terms of why this young Black man was killed for breaking car windows, right? And so, so part of what we do with Safe Black Space is allow for the acknowledgement of that pain, of that history, of a discussion of some of those through lines and threads to current behaviors and attitudes that not only we may have, we might internalize about ourselves, but what the larger community or broader community may have been taught as well. And so we do that while on the other hand, also talking about and acknowledging the truth of the history of Black people, our incredible strength and resilience and spirituality. And, so it's this attempt to connect with Black joy, happiness and celebration, without discounting some of the realities of the quote unquote negative aspects of our experience. And so I think that's the best and most straightforward way to respond to your question, that it's this incredible balance of trying to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And doing that, again, with people who identify as Black, who have a shared lived experience. Not to say that it's a monolith, that there's only kind of one type of person,
Right.
or that everything's related to like race or racism, but just having a container where we can, as I've heard some of our participants say, or women say, just take my wig off, right? Just kind of be in the company of others who may understand you. And so our tagline for Safe Black Space is home, healing, and hope. And so our intention is to create environments and spaces where people feel like they're coming home to a safe, comfortable, warm, loving home.
Yeah.
And that there's also healing that can occur, and a sense of hope, right? Leaving, knowing that we can get through whatever we may be experiencing.
Sounds like you're seeking a transformative journey through that, and really understanding this is where we came from. I always say that we kind of, in our journey in life, where many of us are moving from darkness to light. And it sounds like you're trying to shine that light on the things that we all can look at and understand and change, to then get to a place of transformation, the journey together to find our oneness and our all one. So when I look at words, I love semantics and I love words. I look at the word alone, and I often talk to people about this. And so many people, when they come to us, and so many people in the world feel alone. And I said, all you need to do is add an L to alone, and you have all one. So instead of looking at us as being alone, we can see when we start to come together and we find that we're all one, and we're all one in this. There are many facets to a diamond, and each facet helps the light to shine through that more brilliantly. The issue is often, though, we point out in our hierarchical cultures what's wrong with people more than we point out what's right. And so many times, even in our identification with different races, different religions, different political views, now different educations, we're focused on different bad rather than unique and good and positive, and what we all bring this, even through the things that feel disruptive. And that's kind of what I see, that I always try to bring through what I hear, the stories that are people telling, and what's the subtext. And that's kind of, again, in knowing you and seeing what you're doing, it seems like those are really some of those sub goals with it too.
Absolutely. And to extend a little bit on what you were talking about, I love that alone in all one. That to me as well, there's like multiple interpretations of that, right? This all one, that we are all connected, and that we are all, quote unquote, the same at some level. What comes to mind, a little off track here, but what comes to mind is a quote. I can't remember the author, so forgive me. But this idea that in some ways we are all the same. In some ways we're like only some people. And in other ways we're like no one, right? This kind of concentric circles, that at the core, that's who we are, right? Like I have everything in common in terms of like emotions, right? We all have emotions, but we may have different experiences, as you were mentioning, based on our gender, on our economic status, on our immigration status, on our race, right? And then there's things that make me just uniquely special, and who I am, and the same is true for you. So there's, to me, that idea, like, we got this allness. And then to take it a little further, one of the things that I really believe as a woman of faith, spirituality, of African spirituality and psychology, is that there is this one, there's this supreme source or divine, or whatever name people may want to call it, or different religions may name it, but that's also present as well. And so, part of what we do with Safe Black Space, for example, it's this holistic approach connected to this idea of oneness, where we are each month focusing on a different aspect of ourselves, or our mind, our kind of mental health belief systems, and then our bodies, so our physical health, our nutrition, movement, exercise, and then spirit. So we're not a religious organization, but we talk about what inspires you, right? What motivates you, and whatever name or identity you want to put to that. Let's put some fire underneath that thing, so that you can be, and we can all be our best selves. Um, so anyway,
Yeah.
once, yeah.
I'm wondering if you have, without it, obviously, if you can, kind of protect confidentiality, change names, details, whatever. If you have a transformational story that
Mm.
you can share, if you're able to do that, that really helps typify what you're doing with your
Sure,
organization.
absolutely. There's a number of people that come to mind, but one I want to speak to directly because it's pretty phenomenal. So I'm mentioning that we do these online community healing circles every month. We've been doing them for 7 years. What I didn't share yet is that we also do African drum circles in person with other local organizations. We do a book study and meditation group with actually my mentor, Dr. Linda James Myers, on a 52-week meditation book that she has. We do outreach and education. We have a big Kwanzaa event that we do and honor 7 local Black families for each of the principles of Kwanzaa. So those are a sample of what we do. But there's been a person, a woman who is a single, recently divorced mom who has 2 young children, who started attending our circles maybe 3 years ago online, and over time became more connected to what I call our village, people who are trained, who are helping to facilitate the work that we do. So she participated in our 2-day training a couple of years ago after being a part of the circles, and became more and more engaged. As she became more engaged, she confidentially shared with me that she had been in an abusive relationship with her husband for 10 years. So there was domestic violence that she was overcoming. She was in the process of managing a divorce and working with this still very controlling ex-husband, and negotiating child custody and all of that. And so while we don't provide therapy and clinical services as an organization, I was able to provide support to this person in such a way, right, that she was able to successfully get the divorce, maintain child custody, got her connected with some local resources and an attorney that could help support her through that. And then she's now an active member, and has been since she started, but a more active, in touch, if you will, transformed person because of the work that she's doing, and now providing and facilitating services as part of the work that we do. And it's just, her whole mood has shifted. You talked about transformational work, and that's what we are definitely all about. And, she recently shared with me, she's like, yeah, I definitely want to now become more of an advocate to other survivors, because I see what's possible. And so she's one example of someone who's participated, and I can literally track, and she shared about her growth and where she is in her life now.
That's a great story, powerful story. So,
Mhm.
yeah, those are always ones that just continue to warm our heart, and help us to remember or be aware of why we do what we do, and the value of helping people.
Yeah, and Eric, I have to share one more thing.
Mhm.
Another came to mind just as a clear example too. So I was mentioning that when Stephon was killed here, that the whole community really erupted, and there was a lot of trauma, and that his brother Stevante Clark was very clearly upset and disrupted emotionally and mentally, and all of that, and very publicly. He was on the news. He was kind of very prominent in the challenges that he was facing, having lost his brother and another sibling a few years prior. And so Stevante has participated in our circles as well over the years. One of our early ones, probably within the first couple of months, and then
Hmm.
kind of dipped in and out of our services and
Hmm.
our circles, and so now talks about, that we were one of the only safe places where he could go and be okay. And right, he had been treated. Uh, I don't know if it was involuntarily because he had been arrested for some of the actions that he was engaging in during that
Hmm.
initial process. But he has come, and not to say that it's just solely because of Safe Black Space, but all these years later, he's come such a far way in terms of his own healing, establishing a foundation for his brother, to now
Hmm.
writing a book.
Wow.
And inviting Safe Black Space or me to come and support some of their annual events now, or to do
Hmm.
circles with other moms who have been impacted by police violence. And so it feels like a wonderful partnership,
Hmm.
collaborative healing opportunity that, again, was never like, okay, I'm going to start Safe Black Space and I'm going to make sure we're there for the Clark family. And right, it's just been this evolving
Hmm.
experience. Yeah.
And I think one thing you bring up is this idea of, you talk about a safe home, not just only in Black communities, but there's so many other communities where a lot of people grow up in homes that just aren't safe and don't feel safe. And your home might be the first safe experience and place that they begin to understand what a home is supposed to be
Yeah.
and what loving, really unconditionally loving relationships. And they're always going to be tainted by the our imperfect imperfection, the human experience, but that might be closer to any other unconditionally loving experience, and seeing that bond and that. And the difficulty that I think we have is, while funding these programs, nonprofits, is a challenge, we have to look at what is the consequence to a community, to people who form these bonds, when these organizations serve such a positive purpose, and they do require funding to
Yeah.
make sure, whether it's for the places that we rent or the food that we provide. When I was doing the workshops in Haiti, they were funded by myself and friends and family, that I'd make sure
Mhm.
everybody got a meal, so everybody left with a full stomach, a full heart, a full mind, and a full soul. And
Yeah.
we have to see in that it's providing more than just a service. It's providing a connection and a relationship. And one of the
Absolutely.
things I talk a lot about is attachment. And I talked about in my it's a big feature of my parenting book. But so many people go through life, and I especially think in fractured communities, especially where there are a lot of fractured families, there's so many people walking around with disruptions in attachment, and multiple disruptions in attachment. And
Mhm.
when we look at those behaviors of people with attachment disorders, they have histories of violence. They don't connect well with people. They show impulse control issues. They can be really gregarious one minute and then be really manipulative the next. And a lot of that comes from a place of manipulation. And we will look at cultures that people have issues with. What I think you see, if you look deeper at the behaviors, is you'd look at and see a lot of these disrupted attachment ish behaviors. Is
Mhm.
that do you agree and with that view?
Yeah, 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 absolutely. Right. We know, and as psychologists, kind of what the impact of, again, disrupted attachment, family dynamics, trauma,
Mhm,
and how it can display itself. Um, I'm having multiple thoughts come up. One is from this idea of cultural humility, or how behavior can be misinterpreted in terms of how it's expressed. And if this is inappropriate for me to say, because I'm not trying to promote the show, but there was a recent episode of the TV series Doc.
mhm,
January 28th, I think, was, or 7th or so, was the episode. And in that episode, just to describe it, there was a Black woman in her 40s who came in expressing a lot of pain and discomfort
mhm,
in her abdomen that she had been experiencing for a few years, and seeking pain medication, and saying, this isn't working, the pain medication isn't working. The doctor that she was seeing, you know, basically read off of her chart, didn't believe that she was experiencing this pain, um, thought that she was just med seeking, didn't
mhm,
do some of the extra procedures that were necessary. And the woman was pissed, right? She had attitude. The patient had attitude. She was angry. She's like, nobody reads my charts. Nobody takes me seriously. I don't want the medication. I just don't want the pain anymore. And basically, through the back and forth through the end of the show, it turned out that she had a condition that was brought on by her hormonal shifts as she moved into perimenopause that was creating, doesn't matter what she had, but it was creating some problems. I think it was in her intestine that they wouldn't have found out otherwise. And so they ended up working it out. The woman, got the treatment she needed. The doctor kind of heard her. She was confronted by another Black physician who said, "You're not treating her, the same." And so anyway, it was this whole dynamic of what we're talking about, right? How people may respond based upon how they were treated or mistreated, how others may receive that, and the importance, though, of as much as possible, everybody staying engaged in the conversation or the relationship so that there can be a conclusion, an end, a shift in that rupture. So people's needs are met. And
And I think in there, what you're also talking about is just kind of some of our biases, even though we might have positive intentions. And as doctors, psychologists, pastors, priests, politicians, we all want to serve people. Most of us want to. There are some who want to serve themselves but we want to recognize our perfectly imperfect biases. It's not that biases are good or bad or right or wrong. They just are, and it's how we use them that we want to be aware of in this process of growth and understanding, and recognizing that people often get at a place of arrogance of thinking, I know better, and they form those invisible attitude and belief systems that get projected. And we do it from all perspectives, so I think to think that it comes hierarchically from top down, and we look at things hierarchically, it's not about hierarchy. It's about, like I said, we were talking before, it's all about equity, balance, seeking understanding, seeing that we all can help each other to grow and learn together in this. And I, in some ways, I agree that I look at a lot of issues of diversity, and the issues we have of diversity really come down to the emotions that we feel. And if we feel disenfranchised, rejected, judged, abandoned, and if we have been treated that way, that creates a belief in our separateness. While we can all find our commonalities and how we can all work together in goals, I think, like you're saying, we want to acknowledge our uniquenesses and what connects us to a common group, what connects us to our family, what can help us grow within ourselves as individuals. And that's where I think, again, I love what you're doing, and even in talking about that process of transformation, I'm creating a number of branded images that are teaching images. And I talk about, to me, how I view not only therapy, but really it's becoming about life as a transformational process. It's moving from awareness to understanding to insight, then to implementation, to transformation, and the ultimate end step was wisdom. And that is, we don't need to be in therapy to walk that process. This is a process of, to me, of our own individual growth, of what you are doing in what you're doing, and you've seen and you've explained in a couple examples, just a few examples that you provided, that there are probably countless other examples of what you're doing that you may never hear or see about, but it makes a difference, and I want to bring attention to this that we talked about before. Your organization needs funding. And I definitely love to be a part of putting that out there, that nonprofits need continued funding. So if you want to let people know how to get in touch with you, how to fund, if they want to be a part of it, if they want to do a fundraiser, if they want to, donate something, or even bring other people who they feel would benefit your community and your organization, how would they reach you?
All good questions, Eric. And I just want to acknowledge that, yes, funding is an issue for nonprofits, and funding is an issue for nonprofits like ours in particular, who serve a particular and specific community group and cultural racial focus. And so any contributions folks may have or ways that you may want to be involved, we welcome those. The easiest way to access Safe Black Space is to, and me, is to go to our website, which is www.safeblackspace.org. On there, you can find a tab which will take you to our events that are immediately coming within the next few weeks, as well as an event calendar, which kind of lays out all of our events for the upcoming year. There's also a donate button where you can donate any amount, $10, $50. You can enter as much as you like. We'd be glad for any small or large donation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
every little bit counts, doesn't it? Every little bit counts.
Absolutely. There's also a place where you can contact us. So if you want to know more information about Safe Black Space, there's a contact button, and that'll initiate an email that will come to me. And know that, all of those forms of communications and connections are welcome. What I do want to say is at this point, we typically train new volunteers, facilitators in the fall, in November, and that our healing circles online are every second Saturday from 3 to 5 p.m. Pacific time. And again, both of those offerings are specifically targeting people who are of African ancestry. Some of our other events are Kwanzaa, where we honor 7 families, our fundraising gala in May. Those in-person opportunities are open to the community at large, and we welcome everyone to be a part of those. But you can find out information about us and what we do through our website.
Where are you hoping to take Safe Black Space into the future?
That's a great question. So what I would love to do is continue to build some of our infrastructure. Although we've been operating for 7 years, I frequently kind of laugh with this example, which others and you may have heard before, but it's like we are flying the plane and building it at the same time. Right? Like there was just a need to get going, and then we're making sure that we have what we need underneath. So continue to build infrastructure, operating kind of expenses and support. Right now it's a very short, very, what do you call it? Small ship. Small staff is what I will say. I'm the executive director. It's full-time, my position. I have a half-time program manager and a half-time student intern. And then we have about 25 facilitators, volunteers that really help to keep this thing going. And so I would love to expand our staffing. I would love to grow our village so that we have more. And really one of our ultimate goals is to actually have satellites. So we are based out of Sacramento, but to have, for lack of a phrase, when you think of like McDonald's or Taco Bell franchises, right? Say like franchise chapters, right? Who may be across the nation that still, come to us for some of the curriculum and the training, but really are able to grow the work that we're doing beyond what we offer. And my real ultimate goal beyond that is to really collaborate with, begin some conversations around it, but haven't implemented, but begin to work with an expert who does travel, kind of not only cultural, but also service, trips, missions, that really is centered around understanding and participating on the continent. I've had the honor of being able to go to Ghana as well as Tanzania, which are the east and west coast in terms of some of the slave ports. I've had a chance to go to Egypt, also known as Kemet, the origins of civilization. So would love to maybe have annual trips where each year we understand kind of the origins of our people and the world, in fact, and then also have some understanding as well of what happened at the enslavement process, and then perhaps build in a third component. I haven't yet, for example, been to the African American, the Smithsonian History Museum in Washington, D.C.
Mhm.
but I was there a week before it opened a few years ago. So disappointed.
Mm.
So I'd love to also
Missed it
maybe,
by that much.
but would love to, take people, take a group where we
Mhm.
learn and we serve together. So
Yeah. Wonderful ambitions. I love it. I love it. And I love the idea of traveling internationally too, and going back to going to Africa and seeing where all this started in ways, you know? I think there's an incredible amount of arrogance on the side of more of a white culture that dismisses the intelligence and wisdom of Black culture in Africa and the
yeah,
proximity to Egypt and all those pieces. It just doesn't see that this is where civilization started, you
yeah,
know? And there's a lot to that. And even if you look at the if you look from satellites in Africa in the Sahara Desert, you can see roads that were going to an old town or a city. It was one of the first cities. I think it's where quinoa was one of the um, first grains that was grown. But it
mm,
talks about how thousands of years ago, that was a thriving city and it was very fertile. And then, climate change happened and now it's the middle of the desert and things. So there's so much though to understand beyond just the people, but the history of the cultures and the transformation and changing of those cultures.
absolutely. And if I may, Eric, I literally just a couple days ago was having a conversation with a friend of mine who's helping to do a museum tour called Sankofa. Sankofa means to go back and get it, right? To go
Mhm.
back basically to African culture, to gather. This bird is reaching back to getting this egg moving forward. What do we take from the past to learn to improve or implement in our future? And she was saying, and we were talking about how, and I kind of alluded to this, how we tend to not think about Black people until slavery and until the enslavement process. And
Mhm.
part of what was indoctrinated at that time was that we were inhumane, that we were uncivilized, that we needed, the colonizers to take control of us, that,
Mhm.
we couldn't control the emotions. We, like all of these things that were kind of bred into that experience so that we could be quote
Mhm.
unquote controlled and, owned and all the pieces that go along with that. But the reality is what you just said, that our ancestors who came from the continent, they were engineers, they were farmers, they
Mhm.
were mathematicians, they
Yeah.
were medicine people, they were priests. Like there was a whole,
Shamans, they were
right, the whole
parents,
situation.
all
They
these things, leaders.
were brought over here, right?
Yeah.
And then understanding as well that some of that expertise that they brought was embedded into what we now as a country and as a state here in California that we benefit from, but we have a hard time making that connection. And so I appreciate you acknowledging that and bringing it up because it's like, yeah, come on.
Well, and even looking at, yeah, as you talked about looking at it, African culture, people as being aggressive. There are tribes and areas in Africa years ago that were so easy to be conquered by Europeans because they didn't know an expression of anger. They lived in community, they lived in equity. When we don't need to protect ourselves, we don't typically need to use protective emotions, anger, rage, hatred, arrogance, flippancy, defiance, sarcasm. They were
Yeah,
unnecessary. So when they had a culture that sought power over them, it was very easy to, like I said, to conquer them. And those cultures and tribes are like, what's happening? We
yeah.
don't understand this. I would rather be part of a culture that doesn't understand power over
Mm-hmm.
and understands power with than one that seeks to conquer and to have control. And that's what we're missing. So we have to understand where some of these cultures came from and to stop just having these stereotypes, these cultural stereotypes that are more socialized
Yeah.
after generation and generation, and the way that people have been treated then are a part of how they were born into this world. Now, do we have epigenetics that modifies our genetic predispositions based on what previous cultures learned? Absolutely.
Yeah.
I will give you um, another research fact is they did research on single parents, single mothers in African cultures, and single mothers of Black women who raised their kids here in the United States. And what they found was the influence of stress actually affected subsequent intelligence scores in United States single
Mm-hmm.
moms than
Mm-hmm.
did they affect the single moms in Africa, because there wasn't the same stressors. The sense of community was greater in how they all came together because of their more tribal relationships and things, and they didn't have to struggle like they did. So you didn't have that epigenetic influence on future generations that
Yeah.
can sometimes pass down. So we have to see that as we create safe Black spaces and we have these groups that people come together and we realize community comes from here and then here, then we will alter future generations, because you,
Mm-hmm.
as you know, we can continue to moderate and future generations in epigenetics in the positive direction.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
seeing
Mm-hmm.
all these things that we can do together, and again, I love what you're doing. It's great to
Mm.
connect with my sister from another mother and missed her again, and to see what you've done and what you're doing. And I hope that if there's any way that I can help you in what you're doing, I'd love to be a part of it.
I love that, and I will be in touch with you to put our heads together about how that can happen. And I just want to acknowledge as well that I was mentioning Sankofa. It sounds like you're familiar with that term, and how our current global world would benefit so much the more that, again, each one of us can tap into that idea of collectivism and seeing the humanity in everyone, and really kind of connecting with those values around
Yeah.
harmony and peace and joy. And I'm trying to do my part where I can, how I can, and I know you are as well. And so I remain hopeful, despite appearances, that we're going to be all right.
Yeah, and I think all this stuff's coming up now to help us to see that it can't continue. That
Absolutely.
we're seeing it how it just falls, and it's all happening in all these places of the world for people to really go, no, this isn't what I want. And
Yeah.
we have to, that's where we want to recognize. I loved earlier in the discussion you talked about the disruption, that the younger brother of the man who was shot, that he was
Stevante.
disrupted. Yes. And
Mm-hmm.
I talk about that emotions are neither good nor bad, nor right or wrong, or strong or weak, nor about winning or losing. They just are. And it's when they're disrupted, when an object is placed in motion, it remains in motion until acted upon by the equal and opposite force. So when you have fear-based emotions and or pain-based emotions that are placed in motion, they will remain in motion until acted upon by a love-based emotion. What we do when we experience those fear-based emotions, in other words, when those emotions are disrupted from their resting state, that's when our choices come into play.
Mm-hmm.
And if we could teach everybody the value of those emotions and what they're trying to tell us, teach us, show us, do for us, and
Right.
that we're all here. This is emotion school, and I say it a lot on the show, but I
Mhm.
say it again and again for people to realize, oh, here's another example where he's pointing out, this is emotion school. We all can learn together the value of seeing emotions as assets rather than liabilities. And that really, to me, is the key. And then we see that diversity is uniqueness is a beautiful thing. It's
Mhm.
not about leveraging that and saying, this is why I'm a victim. It's about, no, this is what makes me special. This is what brings me together. These are commonalities we have.
Mhm.
And that's what I think that, through all this, we can really continue to find. So thank you for what you are doing. I look forward to keeping in touch with you, and and I'll hope to have you on in the future to hear more updates on what you're doing. So if you want to donate, please, I'm going to put the name. The name should have been on the podcast. I'll put it up again. Donate if you want to be a mentor. I bet you could benefit from mentors. If you are a musician, an athlete, a politician, a teacher, a parent, and you have a difference that you can make with people in the Black community to be a shining light, just as Kristee has been and so many others are, to be the light that shines the light from what feels like darkness to a place of community, of family, of connection, of unconditional love, then do that. So right here, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. Usually I do it, but I'm going to wrap it up with you on the screen. Thank you, Kristee, and until next time.